So, good evening everyone. Today we are hosting our dear friend from France, Dr. Pierre Garello. He is an old friend of us. He comes quite often to Georgia to help Georgian people and promote the liberty ideas. But it's maybe better if you will introduce yourself for our listeners.
Sure, thank you, Georgi. And further, let me say, I'm very grateful to be here and happy to have that discussion with you. So, I come from France, from south of France, more precisely. I teach at Aix-Marseille University, so this is down near the sea. I teach economics. I've been teaching economics for now quite a long time, and I'm currently teaching economics to lawyers, actually. And besides that, which explains also why I'm here in Georgia, I also run an educational think tank called Institute for Economic Studies Europe. And we do organize summer seminars because we do believe it's our duty to introduce as many students as possible to the beauty of classical liberalism.
Okay, thank you so much. This seems quite interesting. So today we plan to discuss the things about international trade, some pros and cons we have, because the people talk a lot about the free trade and it has many opponents and supporters as well. Can you tell us in a few words, please, what are the advantages of free trade in both countries and for individuals as well?
Yeah. Well, in a way, it's kind of very simple. The advantage of free trade is just the advantage of freedom. I mean, in a way, it's almost paradoxical that people ask themselves whether free trade is a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, it came to the mind of no one, to stop trade between various cities in Georgia or various regions in Georgia. It is clear that everyone would be poorer if you were to do that. So free trade is just freedom of trading with whoever you want, including those who live across the border. So it's and basically it has the same outcome that when you decide to trade inside your country instead of doing everything by yourself. Okay, so that's basically what free trade is all about. Now, trade, of course, is probably the best thing that humanity has ever found. This is probably the landmark of humanity. That's what makes us different from other species. We learn to cooperate, and we learn that through cooperation and specialization, we can get to a much higher level of development. Okay, so we should not have to argue in favor of free trade. It's people who are against free trade that should try to explain to us why limiting freedom, could be something good for individuals or for a country. Now, on top of that, because you were talking about individual and countries, free trade, as I say, means cooperation between people living in different parts of the world. And one thing that many thinkers have been emphasizing is the fact that these bring about a much more peaceful world as well. I mean, you don't kill your trading partner. It's not a good idea. As you know, the French writer from the 19th century, Frédéric Bastiat, used to say, if goods cannot cross borders, then probably soldiers will do it, or now maybe you would say tanks will cross borders. So for all those three, it is clear that we've reached that level of economic development because trade has been developing. We invented monetary theory as well, and not monetary theory, but monetary instrument, and this also make trade much more feasible. It expands, the potential partners. It extends cooperation, and by doing so, the monetary economy is also developing much faster than because trade is easier.
Yes, for sure. There is no doubt for me, and there is a logic behind it. But some people think that this is kind of a theoretical approach, and sometimes they have many questions still about the trading. So could you please tell us about some practical examples where the prosperity of countries and people have increased as a result of free trading?
This is an easy question. Thank you, Yuri. Because look at history. We have tons of examples where trade allowed countries to develop faster. And who was rich in the 11th, 12th century? The big cities in Italy, and among those big cities, the ones that were trading, Venice, Genoa, and so on and so forth. Who was wealthy at the end of the 18th century? By far the wealthiest part of Europe was the Netherlands. The people that were sailing everywhere. And England also was very open to trade, as you know, the idea of the first strong advocate of free trade were coming from England, and they were number one, economically speaking, in the century. Now, if you look at the century, many countries have tried to develop kind of self-sufficient way. That was the case of the USSR, but India, look at India, for instance. Until the 60s, the official doctrine was self-sufficiency. We should be able to do everything by ourselves, And it didn't work, Basically, they were starving. So, and then when they decided to open in the 70s, look at China. Even China is a good example. I mean, look at Singapore, look at Hong Kong. I think, examples are, very numerous. I mean, it's obvious. Maybe one of the great things after World War II was, the famous General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. And probably what people understood after World War II was that finally by fighting each other, by choosing protectionism, you were just preparing for war. So Bastia was right. And after World War II, that's one of the two things they tried to do. One was to try to solve the monetary mess. They were not very successful. The Bretton Woods Treaty was half of a success, let's say. And two, they were trying to reestablish free trade, and if you look at the growth in the second part of the 20th century, it was amazing.
Yeah, sure. And it's clear, that for Georgian people, it's not a big surprise because Georgia, maybe because of its location, the history of Georgia was the history of fighting or trading. We were fighting or trading, no third alternative was for us. So for our fellow listeners, I want to remind that Dr. Garello was involved in a research of the free trade for Georgia and with you. It was maybe 15 years ago, if I remember correctly. So what do you think, as a person who was involved in a research about the Georgia and EU free trade agreement, how useful is the deep and comprehensive agreement with the European Union for Georgia, which was signed like 10 years ago, and what prospects are there for the Georgian people in this direction?
Okay, I think that free trade agreement with the EU was a good thing, no doubt. But it was one piece, I think, in the whole strategy of the Georgian government of that time, which was basically to develop a business-friendly environment, so that Georgia would be a good place to come and do business, and also that Georgian business could be turned to work. Now, I'm mentioning that because the free trade agreement entered into force like in 2016 or something like that, so it's still rather recent. Now, if you look at growth in Georgia since then, it has been fairly good, often 5%, sometimes even a bit more. It is, of course, difficult to say exactly, if those 5%, which is pretty good still, as a growth, is due entirely, it's probably not due entirely to the free trade agreement, but probably the free trade agreement, is part of that success.
Yeah,
so, a free trade agreement is basically freedom. Now, if you open windows to people, it might take some time, for the business to come, for people to develop the habit of working with people abroad and so on and so forth. So, this was really, I think, we should see this agreement as a long-term strategy, I think if Georgia remains vigilant, if you keep that business-friendly environment, you will really continue to see the fruits of that strategy.
Yeah, absolutely, and but still we have some concerns about free trading. I don't know why in Georgia there are some people who are opposing the free trade agreements with the European Union and other countries, because sometimes the people think it's not that fair, and many politicians use the term fair trade and contrast it with the idea of free trade. So it would be interesting. So what do you think is the difference between fair trade and free trade? Because we hear it quite often.
Yeah, well, people like to play with words, and I this is. I remember some years ago a debate between Bill Clinton and Jacques Chirac, who was the president of France at that time, And Bill Clinton, even though Democrats say I'm in favor of free trade, including with less developed countries, and Jacques Chirac was saying no, I'm in favor of fair trade, and so there was another debate that Chirac would say aid before trade, while Clinton would say trade, is better than aid. I think, first of all, that trade is always to some extent fair. Why? Because trade is just exchange, and exchange by definition is voluntary. Okay, so if two persons agree to trade on something, I mean, to me, in and of itself, this is going to be fair. I mean, you don't violate the rights of any person. So this is for one thing. Now, some people might say, and that's where, at least in France, the idea of fair trade comes. They say, oh yeah, okay, but it's unfair because maybe social law in some countries are not well developed, or they don't have environmental law. It's not fair to trade with them for two reasons. Because first, that gives them some advantage. How can I compete, me, a French company, which have to deal with all the environmental laws, the social law, with this, maybe this company in Georgia, or who knows where they don't have all those laws. I think the answer to that is that if you want those countries to have a more advanced social system, a more advanced environmental system, what they need is trade. Let them get wealthy. Let them get wealthy, and then they will indeed, maybe children will not be working anymore, or things of that sort. And of course, one of the things we should add is that free trade, you are still free to choose your partner. So if there is someone you don't want to trade with, or some country, because you really believe, there is something you don't like in that country, fine, don't trade with them. I mean, it's you keep your freedom.
Yeah, of course. So you have talked a lot about the benefits of free trade, but in many countries, probably including Georgia and France, probably you will find groups of people, including politicians and entrepreneurs as well, who are criticizing free trade, and they are promoting, these protectionist policies to protect the local producers. And not only producers, sometimes they say they need to protect local customers because of this unfair competition. It sounds quite strange, but unfair competition is quite dangerous for some people. How will you explain this?
Well, free trade is something that basically benefits everyone. We all gain from free trade. I mean, come on, we have computers here. I mean, obviously, without free trade, our computer will really look doomed, and everything, our clothes and almost everything we use, a car, will have pieces coming from all over the world. The tires come from here. So we all benefit from free trade. But some people punctually suffer from free trade. For instance, if you open the border and you are not a very good company, of course you have something to fear from competition outside. So I think we should be prepared to that. We know that each time we make a step towards freer trade, some people, the one who knows that they have a disadvantage, they will oppose. They will be on TV. They will say, "Look, we're losing our jobs. We should not." So that's why, politically speaking, moving towards free trade is always difficult, because people benefit from free trade, but they will not demonstrate in the street of Tbilisi saying free trade is great, even though every day they benefit from that. But the people who suffer from free trade, and again, in their business, that might be sometimes the case, they will be on TV, they will demonstrate, they will say we want to keep the job for the Georgians, or for the French, or this type of thing. So this is a normal reaction, but again, I think they have no right to do that. I mean, why should you sacrifice the well-being of some so that some who are not competitive could continue their own business? So this political opposition makes sense. Of course, they're going to be lobbying. They will lobby, to try to convince the government. Bastia, you remember Bastia? He had this wonderful story about the candle makers.
Yeah.
explaining why we, if you had some regulation asking everyone to close all the windows, then it would be good for the candle business, but for the whole country, because then we will need more cows, more farming, and so this is lobbying, and this is on in France, I'm sure in Georgia and everywhere, but we should resist that, because as they say, trade is not the winner and the loser. Everyone is benefiting in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. And maybe one more thing is, as you already mentioned, these guys who are opposing free trade, they are more visible because they are well organized as well. They spend their resources.
Exactly, they know that if this free trade agreement goes through, they will lose, let's say, 1 million lari. So it is worth for them spending 20,000. Organize conferences and in order to try to save their millions, so they will organize themselves. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, and maybe finally you can give some advice to our fellow listeners. How should they approach life to relationship with other to improve their quality of their lives and the environment as well they live in. So what's the best approach?
To live personally a better life?
Yeah, sure.
Well,
this is a goal for everyone.
Yeah, well, because we're talking about freedom, I really think openness is one of the key, so don't, openness of mind, one of the things which are good about free, that then people, get to know other people and then you learn. So we should try, even personally, if we want to live the good life, we should try not to close doors and be open to discovery, new knowledge. It's a very exciting and I think very fulfilling way of living your life.
Yeah, great. So thank you, Pierre,
thank you
very much, and hope
pleasure.
We will see more trade and more prosperity for everyone soon.
That's what we should hope.
In our countries everywhere, and more peace, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Georgi.